thank you all for coming on our last day of SAEM. Today we are going to chat about the relationship-driven leader and how a leader can navigate with connection across differences in conflict scenarios. My name is Gretchen Fuller. I'm an EM and PEM physician in Austin, Texas at the UT Austin Dell Medical School system.
And my name is Kay Van Zandt, and I'm also a pediatric emergency medicine physician and the division chief at Penn State Health.
So we envision that you're coming in today, walking into this workshop or a little didactic with some conflicts that you may have experienced throughout your career with colleagues and staff that probably at some point kept you up at night, that weighed on you, and maybe you even have situations like that happening right now in your world. So our hope is that you walk away from today with 3 practical evidence-based skills on how to approach some of those conversations that you might feel more confident and calm and collected in those situations and connected even. Okay.
So academic leadership can be extremely rewarding and oftentimes can be challenging as well. And largely it's due to some of the more difficult conversations. They can feel very high stakes, they can be frequent, they can be emotionally charged. And so being able to communicate through those conflicts, particularly taking into our account our own backgrounds, our own biases, emotions, feelings, our own expectations, can certainly undermine communication as well. And so thinking about and kind of our past training in communication, if we haven't had the opportunity to learn some communication skills and also receive really intentional feedback on it, we may find ourselves using more cognitive reasoning or logic over empathy in trying to navigate through these types of conversations, which can then in turn lead to premature closure of really important conversations and actually leave really important perspectives and viewpoints on the table that really should be addressed and answered. And so hopefully with the 3 skill sets that we'll be teaching today, you'll be able to take them and utilize them not only in those more difficult conversations, but in your daily practice as well.
So by the end of this very brief 20 minutes, we hope that you will be able to list 2 appreciative inquiry questions that you can use to elicit personal narratives in conflict situations and to become aware of team or individual strengths. Describe active listening with reflective summarization to clarify the colleague's interest or goals. And then you'll be watching actually a live demo of all of these skill sets put into place of a realistic academic EM leadership situation, of a potential conflict situation. So, skill number 1, appreciative inquiry. Who's heard of that concept? A couple of people. So, appreciative inquiry is used in kind of change management. It can be approached as like organizational change, but it can also be utilized at the individual or small group level. And it really emphasizes strengths-based questions, and it's forward-focused, not past-focused. It really is a shift and a change from the typical deficit-based culture of medicine with our chief complaints and problems to shift about what are the strengths, what are the values, what are your pride points. So it takes a mental shift for us in emergency medicine. It values individual and team contributions, and it allows you as a leader to effectively delegate, because when you elicit these strengths, you can then delegate tasks and projects to the people that can best do them. And it does reduce bias in decision-making processes. When you hear about someone's strengths, you actually respect them more. 3 examples of appreciative inquiry. One is that you can actually use this to discover someone's strengths, pride points, or values. So some example phrases, and you'll hear more in our demo, would be like, what are you most proud of about this work? Tell me about a time that you felt most energized in this project or in this work. You can also think about designing possibilities with appreciative inquiry questions. Describe your ideal state if resources were not in question about how this could work. What resources or supports that we have right now could you utilize to help achieve this goal? and you can use it to drive positive change. What's one step right now that would be motivating to you or energizing to you that you could take to make forward progress to this goal that you've described to me? How can I help you support to build on what's already working? So these are some example phrases, and you'll see those demoed live. But next step, skill 2.
So skill 2 is about active listening and reflective summarization. And so really active listening is the act of leaning in, listening, and truly trying to understand the other person's perspective, mainly to ensure that you are creating deeper connection and creating understanding and engagement. If you think about reflective summarization though, that's really a powerful technique in order to paraphrase what the other person is saying and being able to reflect back in your own words, again, ensuring that deeper understanding and really deepening the conversation and the dialogue as well. If you think about active listening more as kind of the foundational base of engagement and understanding, and then reflective summarization as the vehicle or the tool in order to, again, deepen that connection and further build the relationship.
And this sounds so simple, but summarizing what you've heard someone say when you're emotionally triggered and want to immediately jump to say your piece of it, to reflect back what you're hearing and check in, like, do I have that right, what else, is really powerful, and it can be hard to use, and we do not always do that. On my best days I do this, on my worst days I do not do this. So the third and final skill is tactical empathy. I'm going to start in the middle with how we describe this. Tactical empathy is actually from Chris Voss negotiation literature. In the clinical space, we call it clinical empathy, which is defined by a researcher named Pojat. There's 3 elements of it. One is understanding the emotion and experience of the person with whom you are connecting or in conflict with. The second piece of it is being able to communicate that understanding. That is Kay's part about that active summarization. And then the third piece is actually intending in an authentic way to help the person. And that's your own leadership skills with the person and with what resources you can, how you can authentically help the person. Why don't we do this more? Well, there are some myths about empathy. One is that we are fixers in emergency medicine. We have to fix it. But we don't have to fix emotions. You have to acknowledge and witness emotions, but you don't need to fix them. So alleviate the stress. You don't need to fix it. The stay professional myth is that we have to stay on the cognitive plane and not go into the emotional, whereas actually if you can effectively dip into the emotional in a way that is intentional and self-aware, it is a superpower and allows you to be even more professional. And then the third myth, emotions are a time sink. We think about that with patients too in our encounters, but there is evidence on the clinical side that responding to emotional distress and naming emotions actually saves you time in clinical encounters. And there's also evidence in fMRI studies that when you affect label or talk about emotions themselves, it allows you to go from the amygdala, fight or flight, into our prefrontal cortex where we can actually start making kind of some rational decisions. So it is effective to move people from amygdala to prefrontal cortex by talking about emotions. Impact is that it improves our clinical outcomes, enhances our fulfillment and well-being, and saves time, and that can happen from both the clinical encounter level with a patient and these colleagues conversations that we're having as in leadership.
And so when we think about empathic validation, it is really not about agreement, or it really is about acknowledgement. And so PEARLS is an acronym that gives you really tangible tools and facilitative responses that you can pick and choose from for the clinical or the professional scenario that you find yourself in. It stands for partnership, emotion, appreciation, or apology, respect, legitimization, and then support. And so how might some of these facilitative responses look like? So for partnership, saying something like, this is a long journey we have in front of us. I'd really like to be present for you in order to partner with you in this journey moving ahead. Or for apology, it doesn't mean that you are directly responsible for the situation at hand, but apologizing for the response that they may have had in response to a situation can go a long way. Legitimization, I think, is probably one of my favorite facilitative responses, mainly because it, again, acknowledges, it supports, it legitimizes perspectives, which when you think about it, even strong emotional responses that may seem a little out of hand actually are typically derived from very realistic and really relatable reasons and triggers. And so being curious enough to dig deeper to find out what the root cause is essentially, and then to legitimize those responses can also help facilitate the ongoing conversation when you get into the negotiation and the solution or problem solving.
So we've talked about 3 skills that a relationship-driven leader can deploy in conversations that involve conflict or differing perspectives: appreciative inquiry, active listening, and tactical empathy. Kay and I are going to put that to the test right now. Kay is a division chief. I am a junior faculty member. Kay, as a division chief, is responsible for ensuring engagement, participation, academic productivity with fixed resources, and actually some resources that are getting diminished right now. And she's meeting with me, a junior faculty member, who has expressed a desire for some allocated time to match their non-clinical responsibilities and citizenship work in the organization. Does this ring a bell for anyone? Okay, here's some laughs there. The specific situation is that the junior faculty member is doing launching a coaching program in the organization, and was told that there would be some funding, and that funding got revoked. And now the leader is meeting with that junior faculty member about the situation. Oh, you have a job. Yeah, you're not getting out of this room. Okay, watch for. Okay, I'm going to have the Del Med crew please look for appreciative inquiry questions that Kay uses. So those are assessing my values, pride points, strengths. The back group over here, can you please look for when Kay utilizes active listening skills and like the summarization and check in to see like getting my perspective. And the group over here, please keep track of Pearl statements: partnership, empathy, appreciation, respect, legitimization, and support. We're going to be quizzing you on this afterwards and coming to you. And I'll keep this up so you can keep track of your job. Okay.
Dr. Fuller, it's so great. Thank you so much for coming in and meeting with me. I know your schedule's super busy. I really want to take some time to first acknowledge and appreciate all of the work that you've been putting in towards creating a coaching program here at the hospital. You know, I don't think I've ever asked you, but can you tell me kind of what drives your interest and passion about creating this type of program?
Yeah, I don't think we've ever chatted about that specifically, and thank you for taking the time to meet. I know your schedule is actually probably busier than mine, but I think the key values that I have, I really value learning and growth, and so for me personally, coaching is a way to do that, but also in the way that we're conceiving of this program, contributing to the learning and growth of others is really powerful to me. And the other thing that I really love is connection and collaboration and relationships, and I know that those things drive our well-being, and we're working on that in our department. But because we've formed this coaching program in a cohort way, I really think there's opportunities to like augment that, and those are things that I value, and I also think can improve things for the department.
You know, there's such power in your words, and I think as a division chief, as a leader, to hear your desire to pursue not only individual academic pursuits is terrific, but to hear your desire to help others, our colleagues, our team members, and really support their wellness and resiliency feels really authentic and important to me as well. I'm wondering if you could create kind of an ideal state with regards to steps moving forward. How would the support and kind of the finances and resources look to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have dedicated, protected time to do this, like we had originally talked about. And there are many academic programs that have that type of structure, so there's precedent for it. But rather than just squeezing it in between shifts, I think it would feel more valued if there was something protected.
No, I can certainly see and feel and hear the frustration. I know we thought we were going to have the funding at this point to kind of drive the work forward, and to hear that that's not the case, I'm sure is extremely disappointing. And I know most people who are also feeling this as well, kind of with the financial climate, it's been extremely difficult for them as well, and so I apologize.
Yeah, and I know I'm not the only one that's like, that, you know, that this is impacted, and it's also, there is like it's difficult to trust that like things are gonna come, you know, when things keep getting pulled, so it's just like, how long are we like working towards this? So you're right, thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think sometimes the uncertainty of it all can be more worrisome than kind of the challenge at hand.
Yeah.
You know, thinking forward though, because I don't want this project to stall, thinking about kind of steps moving forward, what would still feel meaningful and motivating for you?
You know, I did, interesting you asked that, I just saw a call from like the faculty academic office about some grants that they're doing for individual development, and I actually, there's additional coaching training I wanted to get to do the cohort, and I was wondering if you would support my application to pursue some of that grant. Funds. It's small, but that would be helpful.
No, I think that is an amazing, a terrific idea. I will do anything that I can to help support your application. So please send me that link. I'd be happy to write a letter of recommendation for you. I'm curious to hear what other ideas you have.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking if there are people with where you're at in the organization, you might know other people in different departments that are interested in this type of work. So maybe just connections with people that might be good collaborators or people I could learn from.
Yeah, again, I think that's a great idea. I think it'll help kind of the creative juices and your own kind of academic pursuits continue forward. But, you know, it might be a great idea just to kind of piecemeal other groups, perhaps small financial contributions, and create something really special, kind of cross disciplines. And so let's look more into that as well, too. I love that. So in thinking about kind of next steps moving forward, it sounds like we have a plan. And so it sounds like certainly setting up some time for us to connect with other people, and then also thinking about finances kind of more immediately and long term.
Yep.
How does all of this feel to you, or how does it sound moving forward?
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet, and if we can do those 2 action steps, it'd be helpful, and maybe just having some regular check-ins.
Yeah, I think that's great. I'll have my assistant reach out. We'll get something on the calendar, kind of more stabilized, and so we'll be sure to continuously check in and keep our finger on the pulse as we move forward. Great.
Thank you. All right. So, this group, appreciative inquiry questions. What did you notice?
Open right up front with asking Dr. Fuller what's the basis of her interest in a specific topic. So giving her an opportunity to say, not just like, you already know that this is something that's important to her, but why is it important to her, and expound on it.
Yep. So that was the first one, and there's one other one of what would your ideal state look like? In the back, what did active listening skills, maybe one example of an active listening moment that you saw Kay effectively deploying? One of those things?
Okay, she seemed to lean in and actually listen to what you were saying.
Yeah. And she summarized sometimes after she repeated what I said. And there was one time where she said, "How can I support you?" And then she went, I responded, she said, "What else?" Like hearing even more, like it wasn't done there. She like dove in even further. This group, did you notice any partnership, empathy, appreciation, respect, legitimization, or support statements specifically? And if so, which one? Yes?
Offering to write a letter of recommendation and saying that she would support in any way possible and asked to be tapped into other people that she was offering to them as well.
Awesome.
especially when you communicated that you want to not only build your own career in the areas of passion, but you acknowledge that at your stage you're interested in lifting everyone up.
Yeah.
And that both appreciation.
And maybe one more pearl. Girls are important. Yeah.
The legitimization of your feelings of frustration of the whole process.
Yes. I felt legitimate. Awesome.
And so as we think about kind of our takeaways, and again, we went through these 3 skills very quickly, but appreciative inquiry, active listening, tactical empathy, starting with these conversations, again, will truly build the relationship. And until you address some of the emotional and kind of the perspective seeking in the beginning, it's hard to get to, again, those more tangible steps that need to occur in order to get to a compromise or to a negotiation. And so with that, if you remember, with these 3 skills, relationships will be built, and then it's the #1 source of well-being for our faculty, for our colleagues, for our friends. One of my most favorite quotes is, the most powerful leadership tool you have is your own personal example. And so when that example is rooted in curiosity, appreciation, respect, and a willingness to go deeper, you start to not only lead tasks, but you start to facilitate and build those relationships. And then in turn, with those relationships, you lead to influence. And that in and of itself is powerful for not only individuals, but for your team as a whole. So thank you so much.
We're happy to take some questions.
So both of you were, I guess, in a very, engaging mode with each other. And if one party was not so engaging and the other was knowledgeable in these, techniques or frameworks, let's say, I don't know if the chair was recalcitrant or not appreciative of your particular skills and motivations for pursuing this, and didn't offer alternative sources of funding and alternative partnerships, how might this help move things along when there's a wall there?
Yeah, I think there's always, not always, but there's sometimes conflict in priorities, not only for kind of a person in a leadership role. At the end of the day, though, when faculty come and they have a passion and they have a drive for certain work, and although it may not be a priority maybe for the department or for the organization, to be able to support and encourage still that niche development, I think is so key. Because it may not be applicable today, but it may be applicable tomorrow, or it may be applicable in a month or a year. And so still supporting that academic growth and professional development, and showing that you respect kind of those passions and that drive behind it, I think in and of itself is powerful in ensuring that your team and your faculty are in a place that they still want to pursue and they're not looking to other places. Because as we all know, things change. Challenges in our organization are probably pretty similar to another organization. And so being able to listen and be curious about kind of that niche development, I think is so key and important with regards to trajectories of their careers.
And you're bringing up an important issue about hierarchy, because and our identities are always at play in these conversations. And if the person who is actually recalcitrant to it is the leader, or the goal of this conversation is to talk about how leaders can convey these skills. But when you are in the position of potentially less power or perceived power, the active listening is really important to hear what matters to the other person, because if you are not in a position of as much control or influence as the person you're talking with, you actually need to know what they care about. And so even if you're emotionally hijacked by the moment, these skills are important to hear what Kay actually does care about, because if you hit something that she cares about, that you're going to have a higher chance of success. You can pair what you're doing with that person. Yes?
I just want to add, because I think about this in patients that are pissed off, and I think every now and then there is worth a mantra
I love the idea of having a mantra. Whether it's something that you can verbalize with the person with you're in conversation, or it's something that you can tell yourself, but I think both are very powerful. And it allows you to, like, just like we wouldn't approach ATLS without our framework, it allows you to, like, you're naming. We are now starting resuscitation, and it kind of allows you to enter a framework mentally.
And having those different tools to be able to take out of your tool belt, depending on the situation, is huge. Gretchen and I were just talking about kind of the clinical scenario, exactly what you're describing. And when you are emotionally hijacked and emotions are high, how do you de-escalate that? And certainly using pearls and using empathy statements and reflection and perspective seeking can lower it down so that you can proceed on to those important conversations about medical care. Absolutely.
Thank you all.
You want to take